I'm waiting for a word that we are ready to go live, folks, so we'll get a start as soon as. Okay,
Okay.
then we're
Got
ready
the
to go.
word.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to wait for him to turn around. Okay. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who were with us last evening, happy extended evening to you. But we are so happy that you've come to join us this morning for the meeting of the Teaching and Learning Committee. We have a really full agenda this morning. We're going to be talking about a report from summer learning from 2017 and plans for 2018. We will have an update on English learners within our system, and we will also have an update on the blueprint regarding literacy and what's happening with our focus on literacy for this year. So we want to thank you all who are here with us live, and also those of you who are awake on this rainy morning to watch this. We do have two commissioners who will also be arriving, so just let you know that we're expecting Commissioner Canham and Commissioner McFadden to join us as the morning proceeds. So we may start with the report on 2017 summer learning.
Good morning. My name is Shane Hall. I am the Director of Research.
Good morning, Laura Hanian, Director of Differentiated Learning.
Good morning, Rhonda Welsh, Coordinator for Extended Learning.
This morning we will be presenting the results of the 2017 Summer Learning Evaluation, as well as the plan for the 2018 summer program.
So we're going to begin by highlighting the components of the blueprint that align to the work we're doing in the summer. Through the summer, we provide leadership opportunities for teachers, so they lead summer programs, and these are types of opportunities they may not have during the school year. We have a focus in literacy in all of our programming. And we really think a lot about the continuum of learners and the social emotional supports of students, including having social workers and guidance counselors available in the programs. As you can see here, our summer learning goals, and most importantly, is to limit summer learning loss, to increase promotion and graduation rates, to engage students in enriching and engaging opportunities, and provide a safe, healthy environment. The research on summer learning loss, you can see here that we're going to have 2 slides on this, so we're going to talk a little bit about it. That during the summer, you'll see the increase between socioeconomic subgroups increase. And I'm going to go to the next slide. There's a fair amount of research right here in Baltimore that's been done. These are cited in the appendix that really indicate that the great equalizer is out of school time for socioeconomic groups, and so summer is a big part of that, and stemming that summer learning loss is critical. I think it's also important to highlight how we sort of fit into the larger summer learning opportunities. We sit on the panel for the Summer Learning Collaborative, which is a really great opportunity for a number of organizations, including funders, the mayor's office, and different agencies to come together to talk about summer learning for students. So we're part of a larger portfolio, and I think that's really important to understand. And over the summer, we provide a number of meals all throughout the city, and this past summer, there was an increase of 10% in meals that were served, which I thought was great to share. We have, now we're sort of narrowing into the summer learning opportunities that we provide, and on the left, you'll see a map of all the different offerings. This year, as you know, the MTA made some adjustments to the routes, and we worked really hard to make sure our kids were aware of these changes. So during enrollment, we had MTA stations there, because the changes were really about 2 days before we started summer. So we were a little nervous about that, but it went really well, and having the MTA as part of our, so when kids came in to register, we had MTA there so they could answer questions, and we were really thinking about how this change in the MTA patterns were going to impact our summer students. Because I think they picked a good time to do it, but for us, it was impactful. Now, as you go through the presentation, I just want to highlight, it's organized a little bit differently than it has been in past years. We are going to go program by program and talk about what was the 17 plan, what was the evaluation around it, and what's our 18 plan for that program. So we're hoping that people will really understand sort of the why behind the planning. For this school year, though, I wanted to be really clear about the changes that were made to programming. So thanks to some of our providers, we had after-school programming at the elementary sites. Young Audiences, who's here, I don't know, Stacy, if you want to wave. We offered pre-K at 2 elementary summer sites for the first time. We conducted both qualitative observations and feedback sessions to ensure that our evaluation was a mixed methods approach, right? So it wasn't just a quantitative. And we consolidated to 2 high school sites. That was for budgetary reasons, and you'll see that we're going to reconsider that for this school year. And we offered additional options for the continuum of learners.
What you see here are just some bullet points with some high-level results from the summer 2017 evaluation. We, of course, will walk through them program by program, after which Laura and Rhonda will talk about plans for 2018 in response to the evaluation findings. But for now, as what you'll see in what follows this, that Title I summer program students in the elementary grades, they generally demonstrated less learning loss compared to students with no identified summer intervention. That's as measured by applicable assessments, such as the iReady. Students in the middle grades promotion program, they showed improved attendance, however, lower rates of promotion to the next grade compared to the summer 2016 program. Students in the middle school STEM program, they demonstrated slight growth in iReady math scores, but you also see this was a fairly high-performing group compared to a lot of their peers. Students in summer 2017 high school credit recovery programs, they did show higher enrollment. There was higher enrollment in that program than the previous year, but students had slightly lower attendance and credit recovery rates compared to the previous year. And part of that may have been the decision to go to 1 fewer high school site, may have been a factor. For the AP Summer Academy program, more than 75% of students participating in that program enrolled in at least 1 AP course for this current school year. I want to talk a little more about the qualitative observations that were done this past summer that Laura alluded to earlier. One thing we've heard in past years from some of you on the board was a greater desire to incorporate student voice into the evaluation. Well, I want to say that we've heard you, and so we sought to get more student voice as well as see more of what actually happens in summer programs. So we came up with this qualitative observation component of the evaluation. We developed it with guidance from the School Effectiveness Review, or SER team. It might be useful to think of these visits as kind of mini SERs. We utilized the SER classroom visit tool to conduct classroom observations. We also conducted student and teacher focus groups. We observed 66 classrooms in 5 of the large district-funded summer programs. That would be the Title I program. We observed sites from each provider, Bell and Young Audiences, the Middle Grades Promotion Program, the Middle School STEM Program, the High School Credit Recovery, and the AP Summer Academy. Those were the 5 programs in which we conducted observations. We also conducted student and teacher focus groups. Also on that slide, you see a summary of some of the most and least observed instructional behaviors. And on this next slide, here were a few highlights from the focus groups relating to just the overall summer experience. Did students find it worthwhile and enjoyable across the various programs? Some student perspectives on the academic rigor of the instruction they received during summer. And we also, some quotes from teachers about the level of support and feedback that they received. And as we proceed program by program, I'll be sharing some other tidbits and highlights from the various programs as we go one by one. So with that, we're going to go to starting with the Title I, sorry about that, elementary learning program.
The first program we want to highlight today is our K-5 program. It was a Title I program. We served over 2,400 students at 10 sites. Those students received instruction in both math and reading, and they had a number of opportunities to participate in enrichment activities.
These next few slides will show you results as measured by both attendance and the applicable assessments. And I want to say here that all of what you're about to see for the Bell and Young Audiences programs has been shared with them in individual debriefing sessions ahead of today's meeting. So representatives from both Young Audiences and Bell have had a chance to preview and respond to these results. Here we're looking at attendance rates for the Title I summer program, both overall and by the individual provider. Overall, for the entire program, attendance rates were up by a significant amount, as it'll indicate from the 2 bars on the left compared to the prior year. Attendance in the Bell program dipped slightly from 73.9 to 72%. That was a small decrease, albeit a statistically significant one. For Young Audiences, attendance was up rather sharply from just over 63% to just over 75%. Something we learned in the focus groups and observations at Young Audiences sites is that Young Audiences had implemented a strict calling protocol for when students were absent from the program, that either the academic teacher or the artist teacher in the program would call about the absent student in question. And in addition, we learned in the focus groups that students generally enjoyed in the Young Audiences program. They enjoyed it, and they reported that they looked forward to coming to the program each day, and especially because of the arts activities that were integrated into the program. So they look forward to coming in to work on their clay sculpting or painting or whatever artistic endeavor they were involved in as part of their summer program. These next few series of slides, what we tried to do here, you may remember last year we tried to look at summer outcomes utilizing kind of a pre and post approach, using applicable assessments, measuring at a point in the spring prior to summer as our pre-measure, and then in the fall following summer as kind of a post-measure. We did that here, but we made one addition. We also tried to convey where students in the group started. We don't want to assume that they all start in the same place. Some are going to be performing higher, some are going to be performing lower. What we're looking at here is K through 2 reading performance as measured by Dibbles. Now what you will see here, based on those starting points, is that prior to summer, the proportion of students meeting the Dibbles benchmark ranged from around 45% for students in the Bell program to nearly 55% for students in the Young Audiences group. So as we can see, students in the separate programs started out in different places, and you could argue based on what we're showing here that Bell was working with a more challenging population. Now, one of the things we try to do with summer learning is stem learning loss. So what we looked at here is try to measure learning loss was look at the change in students meeting the DIBELS benchmark between spring, pre-summer, and the fall, post-summer. What we saw here is that students with no identifiable summer intervention that did not participate in a city schools program had a loss of nearly 11 points in percent meeting DIBELS benchmarks between spring and summer. That's the bar on the left. Students in the Young Audiences group had the least amount of loss. They were also, that was also the highest performing group, and then followed by the Bell group. The Young Audiences results, they were statistically significant. They were significantly different from the no district summer group, while the Bell group was not. We did our significance testing using regression techniques that also included statistical controls for demographic characteristics. This next slide looks at the K2 group in math as measured by the iReady. For iReady, we looked at the average change in percentile ranking. iReady is a little harder to do this kind of pre and post, especially in this case because in the spring prior to summer they're in one grade, and in the fall post-summer they are usually in the next highest grade. So we thought, what would be the best way to do that? And after consulting last year with people at Curriculum Associates, came to agree that the average change in percentile ranking was a reasonable approach to what we were trying to do. So what you see here, we look at, again, the three groups: students in Bell, students in Young Audiences, and students that did not participate in district summer programming. Again, looking at their starting point, they range from around the 25th to around the 31st or 32nd percentile ranking overall. The least amount of learning loss occurred among the Bell group, as you can see from that very short line in the middle, compared to the Young Audiences and no district summer group. However, we found that the results among the three were not significantly different from one another. These next two slides, we look at reading results for grades 3 through 5, again measured by iReady, using the change in percentile ranking between spring and fall. And just a reminder, the spring iReady window is in March, and the fall window is in September. Here you see the least amount of loss among the Young Audiences group. I mean, really by less than a point. So so you could argue that a lot of learning loss was stemmed by students in that group. It was statistically significant, had a significant difference from the other two groups. The Bell and no district summer were not statistically different from one another. And this is for math in grades 3 through 5. We look again, look at the three groups. And there were no significant differences among the three groups. Young Audiences showed the least amount of loss. It was similar among Bell and no district summer, but again, by the significance testing I described, the three groups' results were not significantly different from one another. A couple of other tidbits from the qualitative observations. Students in the Bell program, they said that they reported in the focus groups that they worked in small groups on a daily basis. They reported that a lot of the instructional content involved review of material learned during the school year, but also that the review of that material, that those review sessions helped them feel more prepared for the coming school year. And students in the Young Audiences program, again, they said they really enjoyed the program and really looked forward to attending each day, in part because of the arts activities that were part of that program.
So with all of that, we intend to continue with the K-5 program using Title I funds. This year we'll be at 8 sites and will serve approximately the same number of students. For the 2017 Middle Grades Promotion Program, we served approximately 350 students at 2 sites. Students took all 4 content core courses, and they participated in enrichment activities. Part of the program, Bell also focused on the whole child, and students participated in restorative practices, so they met every morning, gathered up in circles, and when there were problems or issues that arose between students, they would have those circles to try to resolve those issues with students.
With the middle grades program, we're striving to increase attendance among participating students, as well as increase promotion rates to the next grade. What we can see here, the results from the middle grades promotion program, attendance was higher compared to the prior year. For both years, attendance rates were over 90%. We saw for 2017, the attendance rate was up about 2 percentage points to just shy of 93%. However, promotion rates were down. The increase in attendance was not found to be statistically significant. However, the decrease in promotion rates was. It fell about 6.5 percentage points from 85.1 to 78.6. A couple of things from the focus group conducted at that program. As Rhonda referenced, students took all 4 content courses. Now, students didn't like that they had to take all 4 courses, even though they might have failed just one course. They may have failed just one course, but yet they were taking all 4. That was one thing they indicated they did not like. They did, however, like how the teachers broke down the content and made it easier to understand than during the regular school year. So they did like that aspect of the program. I mean, as one student put it, there are things that you think you know, but working on it more slowly shows that you can get a lot better at it.
So with that, we will continue to offer the middle school promotion program to students. We anticipate pretty much the same number of students at 2 sites. No changes. I think our goal this year will be to try to increase that number of students who are promoted from that program. The 2017 Engineers of the Future program, that program served approximately 190 students. The focus was around math acceleration and increasing 8th grade access to Algebra 1 during the school year via a virtual course. I'm happy to say that we have 18 students from that program, 8th graders, who are from 9 schools who are taking Algebra 1 virtually this school year.
Here we see the attendance rates for 2016 and 2017 in the middle school STEM program, as well as a look at growth in iReady Math prior to summer and after summer for students in the Engineers of the Future program and students who did not take part in a district summer program. We found that attendance increased overall, but it was not a significant amount. We also looked at iReady growth. You can see here that the average percentile ranking grew by a little over a point between spring and fall. But you also see, in comparison to the students with no district summer program, a very wide disparity in the average percentile ranking. So the Engineers of the Future program, in general, this was a higher performing group. One thing during the focus group, students were asked if they felt academically challenged through this program, and students indicated that they did. One said that the Think Through Math instruction that was used in this program, that it got into more challenging, more rigorous content than they were used to, and that it was helping to prepare them for more advanced math, and hopefully, as Rhonda indicated, preparing them for Algebra 1 in 8th grade, which we know is often a gateway toward becoming college ready.
We will be continuing this program into summer 2018. I think the goal for this summer is we have 240 seats available, and we want to make sure we fill every single one of those seats. The next program is the high school summer school program. Students were able to attend to recover credit as well as for original credit. We had our highest enrollment thus far. We had over 1,700 students at 2 high schools this summer.
All right, here we look at attendance rates compared by this past summer and the prior summer, as well as the rate of credit completion. The overall attendance rate, as you can see from the bar chart on the left, it decreased by about 6 percentage points. That was a statistically significant change. That occurred with, as Rhonda indicated, higher enrollment. I do want to contextualize that a little further to say that these attendance rates are largely consistent with district-wide high school attendance rates during the regular school year. As far as the percent of credits earned, we saw with the higher enrollment came a higher number of credits being attempted, and the proportion of credits earned was down slightly from 91.9% to 88.1%. That was a statistically significant change. From the student focus groups conducted at one of the high school sites, students felt like teachers were overall doing a good job, but they wished for some better classroom management. They felt that some behavior problems on the part of some students did get in the way of learning. They also remarked that the hallway monitors did a really good job, but also maybe that they should look into the classrooms more. So clearly there was some concern about classroom management in the high school credit recovery program.
Just to provide some context to that, we had more students at Dunbar High School than they have during the school year, because it was so big. Just to give some context, I just wanted to provide that.
We did have a summer commencement ceremony. We had 169 eligible seniors who could participate, and of those, we had 135 students participating. It was held at Digital Harbor High School, and it was great for families who thought maybe they might not get to see their students walk across the stage. We do intend to continue with that high school program. Again, lesson learned, we had 2 high school sites and over 1,700 students at those 2 sites. We think that did have an impact on attendance and some of the issues that may have arisen. We intend to go with 3 sites this summer and do what we can budgetary-wise to make that happen.
So the 2017 English Learner Program, this program, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next presentation, is targeting students with interrupted formal schooling and really targeting some of our neediest English learners, new immigrants, and providing opportunities for original credit. And it was housed at the same site as the Dunbar High School program.
Right, the English Learner Program was housed within the larger high school credit recovery program. This slide shows attendance and rates of credit earning, just as we saw same outcomes measured for the broader high school program. What we saw this past summer is it had 76 students, a sizable increase from the prior year when you had 44 students, reflecting the big increase in our English learner population. The attendance rates were down from nearly 88% in 2016 to just over 65% in summer 2017. So that was a statistically significant decrease even among a small group, a relatively small group such as that. We also saw a decrease in the rate of credits earned from over 90% in 2016 to just under 75% in 2017. And again, a lot of times when we're having this growth in English learners, and especially with the older students, they're often coming in with very interrupted formal education in their own country. So you're talking about a very challenging population.
So for the 2018, we are still considering the potential of relocating this program. Some of the challenges with that is, in some cases, the students who are taking sheltered content classes during this program have already passed those classes, so we want them to have an opportunity to be close enough to a site where they could switch over and have another course that they need in the traditional high school program. And really have a focus on attendance this year and working with them. Some of the challenges, to be transparent about it, are that we compete with work opportunities, even if they're just daily opportunities. So a student can work for a day, and then they'll miss a day of school, and we work with them to make up the credit. So our attendance might be low, but then we work with them to try to, because we understand that challenge. So that's some of the challenges we have. We also have our 2017 AP Summer Academy. This is a program designed for students who are going to be taking AP classes. It's sort of a readiness summer opportunity. And we do this in collaboration with YouthWorks and provide them a YouthWorks stipend if they're interested in that component.
All right, looking at attendance and AP course enrollment rate among these students, we saw the attendance increased by a sizable amount, but that was not found to be statistically significant, probably because of the relatively small group. Usually with a small group, you need a really large percent increase for it to be significant. We also looked at AP course enrollment. Again, as Laura indicated, the whole idea of AP Summer Academy is to prepare them to enroll in AP courses. And what you can see compared between previous year's Summer Academy and the 2017, more than 3/4 of the students in this past summer's AP Summer Academy enrolled in one or more AP courses. We conducted a focus group with some students in this program, and they expressed that this program was indeed giving them the confidence to enroll in AP courses. They were asked, well, how did they know they were learning in this? And students said, that they felt ready for AP courses and that they would be enrolling in one or more in the upcoming school year.
part of the AP Summer Academy opportunity is exposing them to college visits. So these are 4 of the universities we went to visit with the students. For 2018, one big focus will be to increase recruitment. We would like more students participating. We're hoping to continue the partnership with YouthWorks so that we can have this as an opportunity. And really focusing on the readiness of students for those AP opportunities and charting that as our goal. So each year that I've been participating in this, we've been asked about the difference between the 17 and 18 budget. It's in the appendix, if you'd like to look, there is a slide that compares them on a pie chart, and it's pretty informative because there's very little change between the 2 years. But I do want to highlight just a few differences. So as you were going through the slides, just in case I wanted to be really clear about sort of the changes we're making as a result of the data. So for the elementary programming, we're going to be focused on young audiences, providing those 8 opportunities. The middle grades will be partnering with Bell. We're working on outreach and readiness with the AP programming. And with the ESOL programming, thinking about a potential change in location with a real focus on attendance. We're looking at 3 high school site opportunities. And also, if you have additional questions about additional programming that we've shared in the past that are listed here, there is additional information in the appendix. But we included here were the district-wide opportunities for all students that we had evaluation results from. So we're basically now available for questions or comments.
You don't have to start with me.
Okay, I'll let Commissioner Berkeley start.
So I think you said, for the middle grade students who were not promoted, why, do you know why they weren't promoted? What was that based on?
Sure, I mean.
We have specific requirements for the middle school promotion program. Is that on? Sorry. Students participate in the 4 content areas. The goal is to expose them to new content, bring them up to speed so they're ready for whatever school year they're supposed to go into. If students pass all of those 4 content areas and they pass all of the assessments that are associated with them, they are automatically promoted. If they don't pass all of those content area courses, then we have to look at which courses they failed during the school year and match it up. If they pass the courses during the summer that they failed during the school year, then we promote them automatically. If they fail during the summer the same courses they failed during the school year, we send that back to schools, and schools make the determination based on a number of criteria because they're more aware of students than we are on an individual basis to make that determination. So we're not certain why exactly.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah.
You do mine.
Okay, well, I really appreciate it, and I just want to say I really appreciate this presentation. It was very clear, great information. I do want to commend young audiences with that statistically significant bump in attendance. That's been one of my biggest things. How can we get the kids there? And I think over time, this committee and the Teaching and Learning Department, we've realized we don't have to do everything ourselves. And then we looked at the data, and it was really abysmal about our attendance 2 years ago. And we've been really chipping away. And to see the bump with more students and higher attendance rates is very encouraging. And then seeing the less summer learning loss is really encouraging. So kudos to everyone there. Okay, wait, I just want to get I'll just ask a series of questions. So does that mean 8 sites, young audiences, that's what you're proposing with Bell not in the elementary school, just in the middle school?
Yeah, I mean, unless there's additional funds become available right now with the funds we have available, that's our plan. And of course, if we get additional funding, we will be doing that partnership.
Okay, so it's not, I just want to encourage us to expand the things that are working and stop doing the things that we try that are not working. And it's good because we've been tracking these summer programs and we should be able to see which ones are the most effective. One of my questions is, you said one of the things that you attributed to the attendance bump was just regular calling of the students. And I have to think that it's more than that. I can't
So-
imagine that Bell doesn't call the kids when they don't show up. It's like, I want to understand, because again, 75% is pretty good, but like, let's try, how do we improve that even? I think it's more than that, and just wanted you to comment on that.
So, yeah, I couldn't do, I think part of it was also the after-school programming being available. So if we had heard in the past that after-school programming was an issue, and that was expanded to, and young audiences for the first time had after-school programming available, and that
So
we
the
think is
parents
a
got
struggle.
the whole day.
Yeah, and so if you're working and you needed that extra time,
Got
I
it.
think that was huge. I think to the point around the attendance, there were some other things that young audiences does. So there's this like very special certificate, I'm not saying it right, Stacy, so don't kill me, that you get in the mail, like, wow, you've been selected, almost like this golden ticket. It is a golden ticket, you get in the mail. There's also a lot of individualized attention, so I think it's not just the phone calls itself, it's when you call and you know the student and you're able to comment, that there's a difference in just making phone calls. And I'm happy to go and get additional information and be ready, because we're also presenting this in February to the larger teaching and to the larger board. So if there's any additional information you want around that, we can provide that. But I think those are probably the three, like,
Okay.
major, knowing the students, providing the after-school programming, and really helping them celebrate the opportunity that they get to be there and celebrating the students.
Great. My next question is, I'm always confused. I know we don't spend dollars here, but we have a collaboration of funders that have a universal application, and our students take seats there.
Mhm.
Yet that's not presented in any of the data
So if I get,
or the number of students served. I'm just,
so if you go earlier, Commissioner Canham, in the presentation, I'm trying to get there, sorry, I guess this was longer than I thought it would be. We did try to provide the context for the, sort of the larger summer opportunities this year in the presentation. So you can see here, there's 40 point, I'm trying to read it from here, 40.8% of the offerings overall in the summer were provided by the Summer Funding Collaborative. We are around 18% of those offerings overall. Parks and Recs is about 18%, or 17% if I'm reading it correctly. And then Youth Works provides about 23. And some of the kids are in
yeah,
multiple
they
programs.
double them up.
There's a little bit, it was a little bit of
My
doubled up.
big point, because I've been pushing on this, I've attended meetings, is that they are having a universal application and some research that we can pull from to understand attendance and are the kids doing better based on attending their programs. And so we should, can we put them alongside each other? Can we put them alongside Young Audiences, Bell, and the Summer Funding Collaborative in some sort of way? I think it's because they're spending a lot of time. The last year I asked, they said, we have the universal application and we're putting things in place to actually do that. And so I guess my question is, do we have the data on their
Yeah,
program?
I think that's a great question. I'll let Shane jump in on the data. I will say that around the practices piece, so the Summer Collaborative meeting is a place where we come together regularly and discuss strategies and supports. I will also say this piece, different programs have different expected outcomes and intended outcomes, right? Our Title I programs are specifically designed to support students in the areas of literacy. Now, if you're a different type of program and you have a different sort of focus on it, I'm not sure, we're gonna have to talk to an evaluator about the appropriateness of comparing, let's say, for example, literacy scores between those programs. Now, attendance, it's also a little, so there's also programs, like, I just want to give you an example. There are programs that are intended to be drop-in programs, right? So you
Right.
can drop in whenever you want. And so it's not that we're not talking about that, we are, and thinking about it. The comparison is not as simple as just comparing attendance. So for us, we want kids there every day. We're doing skill-based intervention. They might have a deliberately a drop-in program that you don't have to come to every day. It's just an
I-
opportunity if you'd like it that day.
I got it. I've actually gone to some of the summer collaborative
Yeah.
meetings. We have to, because it may make sense in spending as much money on our Title I dollars there to actually fund the summer collaborative. Like, I understand the barriers, but we should figure this out. Like, because some of them, there are 14,000 students showing up. Like, so they're taking seats. My assumption is that they're more in community-based, so they're easier to get to. Maybe not, but we should look alongside this data alongside, because, and I know what the challenges are. I know the drop-in, I know the attendance, I know the practices, I know maybe it's not all about literacy, but I think a lot of them are about literacy. And so, and again, I thought they were trying to get very deliberate in saying who's moving the needle in attendance and possibly academic pieces as well. And so I would like to see that. And I don't know whether, I don't know if we could do that by the February board meeting, or we should talk about the February board meeting. But anyway, that's a very important piece. We have 14,000 of our students going there, and how effective are those programs?
And those data for these other programs in the broader summer learning universe outside of city schools, those data are with Burke.
Right.
And they are still working on the analysis of those. We've not seen the results yet, but we do know they are working on them. I suspect a lot of data cleanup is involved when you have multiple programs from multiple providers. You have multiple ways of keeping data, so there's a lot of data cleanup and formatting involved in the work. I'm certain.
Again, yeah, and I know that they're trying to crack that, and I know you guys are working together on that. I'd like to see it all across the board in any way possible, so we can think about supporting programs that are working. I do have one more question, or the AP question. Why are there only 45 students?
Yeah, so
I mean, is it funding? Because maybe we should we should plan on more funding. Like 45 students, we have to have more kids ready and prepared. How do we? Just tell me a little bit about that. How can we increase that?
Yeah, I think we're thinking a lot about that. We're working on recruitment. Some of it is they have to get their YouthWorks application in at a certain time. It's a little bit of coordination and I think earlier planning, so we're doing that. I think it's ensuring that they have those AP opportunities at their schools when they get there. So looking at the high school programming in general, and we're working on that and thinking a lot about that. That's something that sort of, as you know, with my other roles, is very near and dear to my heart. So I'm thinking a lot about this AP programming and how we can do a better job of expanding it and ensuring that more kids have this opportunity. So what we can do is for the February meeting, we can talk a little bit about that and make sure we've highlighted and we provide some of that.
I'm just going to do two of my questions, and some of them are around just sort of lessons learned. And I'm going to start with the AP because you mentioned the connection with YouthWorks.
Yep.
And then in talking about the English learners, the fact that some students need to consider working. So have we considered at all any connection with perhaps something like YouthWorks with those students as an incentive for them for attendance?
So some of the kids don't qualify for YouthWorks. For a variety of reasons. There are certain requirements for enrolling in YouthWorks, and our English learners don't always qualify. And so that isn't an opportunity, that isn't something we will be able to do for this school year. We've looked at different grant opportunities. The other piece is the students in the AP program are not getting any credits for this. Our English learners are getting original credit. So they are getting credits and moving up in their high school programming. I'll talk more about English learners. That's literally the second presentation. You'll have to hear me all morning, I guess, this morning, talking. But I think we were really excited by the boost in the number of students. If you notice, it was like an increase of over 30 students. And we're targeting really hard to reach students. These are students with interrupted schooling. They've had years of interrupted schooling. Some of them have not been past second grade, and they're 16 years old.
Okay.
And so we just have to continue to strategizing.
Okay, because I think to the extent that, and however we could do it, if there were some partnerships that would allow them, and I know some of that is going to, needs for the family. The other one I had was around, in looking at you talked about the forums with the students, the groups around the promotional and what happened with the middle school and the fact that they were taking full courses even though some of them may not have needed them. And I get the idea of the well-rounded experience. Do you think could that have had any impact on students who, if perhaps, have been able to just concentrate on the course that they had failed, may have done better, or is there any consideration about
We're actually
looking at
thinking about that right now. We're in planning with Bell. I'm struggling, to be fully transparent, I'm struggling with both sides of it, right? I come from a secondary background. Middle school is really where my strength is. I see the benefit of a well-rounded experience. I also see the benefit of cross-collaborative experiences. So an opportunity like National History Day type opportunity where that's cross-collaborative, but maybe not. And so we are deep in conversation with Bell around the actual programming. And if you noticed, what was interesting was the attendance was quite good. So it wasn't a problem of getting students there. We're thinking a lot about how we're engaging them once we're there.
Yeah.
And how we're providing those opportunities and the types of opportunities. So is there a way for them to really dive deep in the course that they're struggling with, but also have these cross-collaborative opportunities? Because there's something to be said about high school readiness, too. And we are looking, when we looked at the data, it wasn't as if, to be fully transparent, there were kids where they passed this one, they failed one course and they had high passing grades in the other contents, right? And so I struggle with not making sure they have all that content. And so it's just a balance of, they're not quite in high school, so they're not just doing credit recovery. So it's like, how do we provide a holistic experience, focus in on the subject that they're struggling with, but ensure that they're ready in all the other contents? But I think that's an excellent question.
Any
Oh,
other?
and I wanted to add, I'm sorry,
Oh,
one thing. We are looking at, for the English Learner Program, a potential partnership with RYP, who has a summer program, and combining them at one site. Some of the RYP refugee students do qualify for the YouthWorks opportunities, so we're hoping that we could give them an opportunity to do some of the YouthWorks and take some of the classes. So we're looking at that partnership. You can see some about RYP in the appendix, but we are thinking about that.
Okay.
I should have said that earlier, I apologize.
And then my very last one, and I think then we need to move to the next. I know that there are individual schools that are also doing summer programming. Where or can I find them in your pie, and where would they show?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a hard one. I think they would show, it's a little hard to say where every summer program is
Okay.
in Baltimore City, and that's part of like the collaborative's desire to know where everything is. I think a lot of them are part of the Summer Funding Collaborative, so you can see because they're community-based. I think even some of the other programs like the Parks and Recs or the Youth Work, even if they're in a building right next to it, they're really targeting that school. What I can do is we can take that question back and see what we can do to provide that information. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, and I guess my other part of my question is, if individual schools are doing programs, are there ways that they can be included in terms of some of the evaluation that's done to,
And I think that's to Commissioner Canham's point,
Okay.
like how do we sort of have a larger understanding of the evaluation of programming and what's effective?
Okay. Thank you.
And I think that's right.
I think we're going to move, I just need to say, and I know we're moving into the English learners, and you're going to continue talking. But the teacher in me, you all are so far away. Could you possibly just push your table up a tiny bit? I feel like I'm talking to,
Look, move the table closer.
just, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but we are all here in the same room. That's better. Thank you. I tried to resist doing that, but I couldn't. So now we are going to have the update on, and again, thank you all for the report, and I also want to thank all of the partners that were mentioned. I know some of you are here today. Thank you for what you do to help our children. And it is obvious that, and I'm a very great proponent of summer learning programs. So again, thank you for what you're doing for the students of Baltimore City. So now we'll move into the English learner update.
Hi, I'm Laura Ohanian, Director of Differentiated Learning again.
Shane Hall, Director of Research.
So, and you're going to have to hear me talk a little bit. I apologize, our coordinator of ESOL had her civic duty this morning, so you'll just have me today. So today we're going to talk about the English learner update. One thing I would like to highlight as really important is understanding that the supporting our English learners is really beyond just ESOL programming, though we'll talk a lot about ESOL programming and some of those wraparound supports today. It's really every teacher thinking about their English learners, thinking about academic English proficiency and differentiation and how to support our students. And really thinking about not just their academic, but their social emotional needs. So we'll be talking a lot about that today. Here's a map of where our English learners are currently reside, and overall, the district percentage, we are at 6.6% of our population is English learners. Just to note that last year, that was 5.6%. So the increase is quite rapid. On the left, you'll see the countries of birth. So about half of our English learners are U.S. born. So they come to us in pre-KK. And you can see we have a number of different languages they speak. French was in the top 5. It's still pretty common language, but it's like number 6 now. But our English learners, so we get a lot of questions. We get it all the time. Why don't we just do bilingual programming, just have Spanish, right? Well, our kids come from 85 countries and speak 73 different languages. So that's not an option in every setting. Here you'll see the growth of our English learners. As you can see, I mean, I am not a data expert, but everything is going up, right? That's the trajectory. It is one of the populations in Baltimore City that's growing quite rapidly. I think it's the most rapid growing population. And even though our middle and high school numbers, as you notice, are a little smaller, they're actually growing at a faster rate. Here on the left, you'll see the schools whose population of English learners, so currently identified English learners, is over 20%. I want to note that they're from all over the city. So I think one of the misconceptions is all of our English learners live in Southeast Baltimore. They do not all live in Southeast Baltimore, though that's a common misconception. And you'll notice we have 2 high schools whose population is over 20% English learners. But on the right is a breakdown of the number of schools and the population of ELs in those schools. And there you'll see that even though we only have 53 current ESOL sites, we have English learners enrolled in 123 schools for a variety of reasons. They're choosing to attend. And we have 14 schools with 20% or higher population of English learners. So now I'm just going to clarify terminology for you as I go through some of the next sets of data points. An English learner is a student who's currently receiving ESOL services. Immigrant students are students who are born outside now of the United States. We track that for 3 years based on federal definitions. Reclassified English learners, which I will use interchangeably when I'm speaking with exited ELs because I think that's easier for people to remember, but reclassified is the appropriate terminology, are students who no longer receive ESOL service, but we continue to monitor for 2 years. Okay? Please, at any time, if you have questions, let me know. So, as you can see, our population of English learners is growing. We went from 4.7 to 5.6 to 6.6%, which is quite a large growth. You saw with the lines. Our exited ELs, the numbers of exited ELs went up slightly this past year. We'll talk a little bit about the changes to access assessment and what's going on with that. We also have the number of immigrant students has increased. And the number of students, now this is a different group, the number of students who report speaking a language other than English at home is also increasing. And they don't necessarily require ESOL service, right? So you can come from a family whose your parents speak another language, but you don't require that service. And we'll talk about how we determine when or you've exited service. And you notice that's a pretty high percentage, 10.6% of our families. The next slide talks about the continuum of English learners. So, we do a lot to try to help educators understand that English learners are not sort of this monolithic group, right? They're not just English learners. And we'll talk a little bit about proficiency in a second, but they have sort of different strengths and needs. So we have dual identified English learners, and you can see that percentage has increased, and those ends have increased. So you can imagine the growth in those numbers. We have gifted and advanced ELs, and we use a nonverbal screener for our gifted process. So in an effort to continue to identify those English learners that are also gifted, we're also looking at progress on access, so their proficiency levels. So we're looking for students who have made major gains, right? Who are outside of the traditional trajectories. Not that they're potentially, of course, they're learning English quickly, but are they learning at a rate that would indicate there's more going on, so we can identify for giftedness. We're looking at that. Students with interrupted formal schooling, I mentioned that earlier, that's a gap in their formal education. There's a variety of reasons that might happen. And we also have students who just have much of their formal education in a refugee camp. And though they're being provided, I don't have pictures here, but you can see they're intense, they have limited access, so they come from a long background. You can see the refugees, the number of refugees, and our long-term English learners, this is another term, these are students who have been in service for more than 5 years. In general, and I'll talk about that in a second, we expect our students to exit around 5 or 7 years of service. The research says between 5 and 10 years to attain academic English proficiency. So those that are more than 5 years, we're starting to monitor and say, is there more going on potentially than just an English acquisition or language acquisition? Initial identification, so just a quick note, we're part of the WIDA consortium, the state of Maryland. WIDA is a 36-state consortium of districts and states that work together to have an identification and assessment protocol that's aligned, along with standards and resources. This is very important if you know the research around English learners, because identification and assessment can be troublesome for them. And if you don't have a set protocol for that, that can be a problem. So we use the WAPT, which is a screener. It's transitioning to be online. It basically triggers the general process is a student enrolls, they fill out the home language survey. The home language survey indicates a language other than English at home. We then go in and we'll test the students, and we determine whether they qualify for service. Now, of course, there's going to be exceptions, like potentially a student who's been adopted, right? Whose family speaks English at home, but who might require service. So we look for those cases, but in general, this is how it happens. And each year, WIDA access for ELLs 2.0, which is the assessment, is provided. A student to exit service, it's a 4.5 have proficiency. We'll talk about proficiency in a second. For students who have severe cognitive disabilities, we have an alternative access assessment as well available. Okay. So for this, we found out pretty late last year, and you guys were aware of this because we had done our English learner update, that the Access 2.0 scoring was going to change. And WIDA had told us some things we could expect were that student scores would go down, fewer students would exit, students may require service for longer periods of time, and that higher grades levels and higher proficiency levels would be the most impacted. And check, we saw all of that in our results for this school year. It's it's difficult for us to track, to look at proficiency growth compared to last year to this year as a result of this, but we're sort of treating this as our sort of ground point, and we'll continue to track from here. Does that makes sense? Our proficiency distribution is here. Over 30% of our students are level 1. That's the students who are recently arrived or are new to the English language, speak very little English, and that ranges from 1 to 4, which are students who's, who have the oral language, the academic English. They're very high in their proficiency. In fact, in some cases are outperforming their peers. This is the distribution by grade level of proficiency. Obviously red is 1 and the green is 5, so you can see that. And what's interesting, I think here, what's most interesting is you'll notice in elementary grades, K has the largest number of 1s. That makes sense, right? Because they're entering. And as you go up all the way into 5th grade, in general, it goes down a slight increase in 4, 5. We've organized it in this way because this is how WIDA is organized, the assessment in these particular grade band. But in 6, 8, 9, 12, you'll notice an increase in the number of level 1s, and that directly correlates to the diagram you saw earlier in the growth at the 6 and 9, the middle grades and high school level of recently arrived immigrants and refugees. So you'll see more students that are recently arrived, if that makes sense. This is the distribution of our exits. So the highest exit rates is at 4th and 5th grade. That's about right. If we go look at the research, we want our students to have about 5 to 7 years of service. That's right. If they start in pre-K, and we're one of the few districts in Maryland that actually services our pre-K English learners, we are not necessarily funded for that, but we value the importance of it, so we continue to do that. So if they've had service from pre-K to 5, that's about 6 years, right? So that makes sense for our exits to be at this point. And it also makes sense for the first grade, for the students to be sort of lower. What's really interesting, though, in looking at this is, and this I think is sort of startling in understanding the growth we're having. In every iteration of our Access 2.0 over the past 5 years, over 30% of our students have been first-time test takers. So, meaning, we basically have a third of the population that's brand new. That's how fast we're growing. So our percentage point is growing, right? And you're seeing that, but within the population, because this growth is so rapid, you can imagine what that means for a teacher or a student. This year, it was 37.3% of our students were first-time test takers. Now, part of evaluating the effectiveness of an ESOL program or the success of an English learner, it is to look at how they're performing on assessments during their service of an ESOL. But it's also to look at their performance once they exit, right? So once they attain academic English proficiency, how are they performing? And I'm going to go through this data. So Shane's here to help me in case I have he's the data person. So for ELA, the exited and non-ELs perform significantly higher than the EL students. And that is statistically significant. The difference between exited and non-ELs is not statistically significant for ELA. For math, however, our exited students performed significantly higher than both the non-ELs and the EL students in both grade bands.
And I would just throw a caution flag that I often wave when judging statistical significance. It is important to be mindful of the very different N sizes that you're looking at here for these three groups. For the exiteds, the English learners, and the non-EL, very different group sizes, and that has to be taken into consideration.
Right. So for ELA, 10, 11, and Algebra 1, 2, we're looking at, for ELA, 10, 11, the non-ELs performed significantly higher than ELs and exited ELs. And then in Algebra, the exited ELs perform significantly higher than the non-ELs and ELs. It's just, we wanted to make sure we provided the context of students within the program and also that have recently exited the program. In this next slide, earlier this year, we provided an example of heat maps, and you can actually find the actual heat maps themselves in the appendix slides 41 through 46. What we did here was summarize the results. And so I'm going to explain this to you as quickly as I can. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. So each cohort that you're seeing here represents the same students that started in grade 3 and where they are in grade 5. So for BOI, I-Ready Performance. So in grade 3, they were identified as English learners, and where are they in grade 5 right now, beginning of the year, and how are they performing? Within the columns, what you see is in red, students who made no gain. So we'll just look at, I'm just going to do grades 3 through 5. I won't go through all of them in detail with you, but for grades 3 through 5, 14.8% of students made no gains from the start of 3rd grade to the start of 5th grade. 3.8% grew about a year in their scores. 33.9% gained 2 years, right? So regardless of where they were when they started, let's say even if they were at a 1st grade level, even in 3rd grade, they went 2 years. They made 2 years of growth. 13%, though, made 3+ years of growth, which is really what we would want to see with an English learner on an ELA assessment, to be really honest with you. We need them to make about 1.5 years of growth each school year because they're acquiring academic English. Now, it's not a linear, literacy development is not a linear development. Those of you who are educators know language development is not linear. It's not like, you're not going to see it happen. You can see sort of, the curves can be a little bit more bumpy than a straight line, right? Because a lot of it's contextual and based on content. And so you'll see, you might see social language develop much more quickly than academic English language, right? And so there's context to it. And based on these results, we want to look at the best practices. So what we want to do is sort of unpack. We're also going to look at students that are not moving, of course. But we want to look at those who gained 3 or more levels in 2 years and say, and we've started doing this, just so you know, and I'll talk about that in a second, what schools, what classrooms, what teachers, and investigate. What are the teacher practices? What are the school structures? What are the student supports? And then to share the best practices. So can we do peer observations? Do we do ILTs? Do we have PLC opportunities for teachers to lead? So we're thinking about that. Just really quickly, around the attendance rate. In general, our English learners and immigrant students have higher attendance rates than their non-EL peers, and we provided that background. I do want to talk a little bit today about the preliminary lessons learned. So we've looked at all this data, we started thinking about it, we've talked to our teachers, we've gone in and done classroom observations. We have amazing English learner team. Leanne is behind me in the audience, hopefully waves right now, but she's here, she's one of our specialists. We have a coordinator of ESL who's fantastic. We have ed associates and teachers and a really enthusiastic group of staff who is there to advocate and instruct those students. So what are we learning? Collaborative planning is critical. Having an ESL teacher talking about your English learners is critical. Co-teaching models. Students who have co-teaching. So we talk a lot about co-teaching with special ed. We don't talk about it as much with English learners, but how does that happen? What's the best way to implement co-teaching? When do you do that? When is it possible, right? If you're the only ESL teacher in a pre-K-8, it's very hard to do co-teaching. I've been a teacher, I know, but if you're only servicing grade 1, and which we have schools that have 5 ESL teachers, co-teaching is definitely something that should be in the mix of your schedule, right? Integrated instruction practices, incorporating language standards. And one of the big things that we're really pushing hard is incorporating language objectives. So when you're doing a lesson, the best way I can explain it is I was a science teacher for years. And let's say I'm trying to compare plant and animal cells, right? I need to give them the terminology. They need to know what a chloroplast is, a cell wall. They need to know cytoplasm so they can compare the two. But they have to also know what compare and contrast means. right? They have to also know, they have to understand the language of the actual objective to obtain it. And I will say this, what we are finding is when teachers are careful about this, it helps everybody. Because the reality is, we're instructing for academic English, and we all need to be doing that. So when you're cognizant of academic English instruction, everybody benefits. Sorry, I'm a little passionate about that part.
And that's why I think, that's what is easier in some ways with math instruction than language instruction.
Oh,
Because
huge.
in some ways, those definitions are very much inherent in the instructional plan versus in English, it's a little.
Oh, yeah, and it's a lot more contextual. You're 100% right. So the ESOL strategy, as we look at it, we're looking at school leadership, building opportunities. We provided specific professional development to 2 new sites. So Forest Park and Tinch-Tillman are now two new ESOL sites. So we're providing targeted professional development at those sites, differentiated sessions, thanks to our CAO. We have a differentiated English learner session, and we have principals who are interested in that work, who are working together on the cycle. And we'll talk more about that. We have literacy, and we'll talk more about our focus around literacy in a second. We're going to actually talk about the whole child. We're doing a lot around restorative practice, and I'll talk about that in a second, and the supports. And the big thing is we're really working and thinking a lot about an intake center. A lot of larger districts have an intake center for English learners and their families where they do a lot of the assessment right there and have the language services. So we're investigating that opportunity right now because we're starting to hit that tipping point where we're starting to become a district that has a lot more English learners, and we need to be really thinking about systemically how we provide those opportunities. Professional development. For our ESOL teachers, we're aligning to the cycles of professional learning. Obviously, we're looking very deeply at writing and speaking. We also have differentiated during the cycles for the administrator's session for ESOL. We are also doing quite a bit. For the first time this year at our large sites, we've identified ESOL reps. And they are leading the work of the ESOL within their schools. We still provide the support, but we're giving them professional development every month, along with our staff. So we have ed associates that travel to all those sites, including the ones that have reps and the ones that don't, to provide that direct targeted support. And then we have this summer, actually, we had a targeted workshop provided by WIDA for 3 days for our large sites, and they got so much out of it, and really, they want that opportunity again. With the curriculum, we have newly developed grades 1 through 3 aligned literacy modules. So, this is sort of one of the things we think a lot about is if I'm providing ESOL instruction, whether it's a co-teaching model or a pull-out model, what am I doing to support those students that's aligned to what's happening in the classroom? So just a simple example, that I'm not pulling them out talking about animals and they just were in their class talking about water and the water cycle, right? I need to make sure that my learning is aligned to what's happening in the classroom. So even if I am the only teacher at a pre-K-8, you might not be able to do co-teaching, but you're going to have integrated instruction and you're going to have an approach that's aligned. Otherwise, we're just confusing students, right? We have kindergarten in development. So we have pre-K written, we have grades 1 through 3, we're working on kindergarten. We have a newly developed ESOL English 9 curriculum, and that is for English credit. That is pretty exciting and currently being offered. We are working on English 10. I think we'll probably stop there because at that point they can usually take 11 and 12. Grades 6 through 12 newcomer programming. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that for a second. There's a difference between, we really think of our ESOL curriculum in 2 strands. K-12, we think about sort of our aligned curriculum. How do we ensure those students that are a little bit higher in proficiency are getting aligned support? Around 3rd grade, when you make that transition from learning to read to reading to learn, we really need to think about differentiated programming for our newcomers who don't even have the basic language, right? And so that's what we call newcomer programming. And we're in development for grades 6 through 12, looking at intensive newcomer programming, and then we'll look at 3 through 5 once we've done that. And we're also looking at a formative assessment for writing that we're doing across the board that aligns to the WIDA rubric and aligns to the cycle work. We also have extended learning opportunities. I talked about the summer program already. This is an opportunity for us to provide sheltered content. Sheltered content is content provided by an instructor that focuses on English learners, so they're sheltering, but it is the same content with sheltered instruction. This summer, we offered English 9 and 10, government, U.S. history, algebra, geometry, biology, and environmental science. And it's for overage students. And the teachers are all dual certified. We also conducted circles during our practice. We have external partnerships that are invaluable, including RYP, Soccer Without Borders, Casa de Maryland, EBLO, and we have after-school programming, homework clubs, and coach classes for students. We also have an amazing bilingual program at Lakeland. They're in their second year. They're actually going to be presenting tonight, the kids, so get ready for that. That'll be fun. I'll be here. So I won't do too much because they're going to talk about it tonight, but it's a wonderful program of English speakers and Spanish speakers together in a classroom. As I said earlier, you can't do bilingual programming everywhere, but the research on bilingual programming is clear. It's beneficial to everybody. We are doing a lot of work around embedding restorative practice and trauma-informed classrooms into our instruction, and really thinking about, so on Friday when we do our PD, we are really thinking about how do you use restorative practice as an instructional tool. So part of our instruction in ESOL is to provide instruction in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Listening and speaking are specific areas that restorative circles can help build. We're also thinking, so when you look at the research on writing and English learners, for English learners specifically, it's very important that they're engaged in the conversation, so that listening and speaking piece as a pre-writing tool. So how do we ensure that you're using those prompts and aligning to what you're trying to do later? So we're talking a lot about that with our ESOL teachers. And we're doing this in collaboration with OSI, City Schools Newcomer Project, which Eric is here, and I'll talk about him in a second, does a great work, and then a restorative practices team in City Schools. The Newcomer Project, I feel very lucky that we have Eric and his team supporting the English learners and the recent immigrants. They serve as immigrant students and their families in schools. It's a three-prong approach that looks at needs assessment, building capacity, and direct service. They've also done some great professional development, not just for schools, but for our ESOL teachers on trauma-informed classrooms and the specific needs of our immigrant students. Staff members are bilingual, and so I mean, if you ever want to see some amazing work being done, you should go out and see their student groups and their supports. And again, Eric is here. I'm so glad he's here. Eric, are you waving? Good. And their work is amazing in supporting the social and emotional needs of our English learners. I also wanted to highlight that this summer they had an outward bound leadership opportunity for Maryland English learners, and we had the largest group of participants. We were more than 50%. The kids had an amazing opportunity. We also wanted to highlight at Ben Franklin, they have a bilingual peer mediation group, which is in collaboration with the University of Maryland School of Law. And so these are just some of the amazing opportunities that our English learners are engaging in that are outside of the classroom. So ESOL, I always like to say, is really two-part approach. It's service and it's content, right? So it's a little different from other departments in that we're providing service for students and we're also providing content around academic English. So when we're providing service, there's a lot of operational pieces that come to play. So we talked about the reps and having ESOL reps, which is working really, it's a great model. We also have very detailed instructional model guidance of how do I schedule an ESOL teacher if they're the only one in a pre-K-5, in a 6-8, in a 9-12? What if I have 3 teachers? What if I have 5 teachers? So we've given a matrix along with instructions and professional development around that. Staffing support, so we work in partnership with human capital. It's very hard to find an ESOL teacher. We are literally have teachers teaching the ESOL classes at Notre Dame and UMBC, and we're recruiting them as early as we possibly can. But when an ESOL teacher graduates, everybody's competing for them because Maryland has seen the largest percentage point growth of English learners in the country. And the largest growth is in urban areas. So you can imagine what that means for Baltimore and PG. So the demand for teachers is high. So we're looking at where can we go? So like in Florida, every teacher graduates with ESOL certification. So we're looking at, so we're targeting. Expanding teacher staffing and ESOL sites. So we're growing every year in the number of ESOL sites we're adding at a pretty high rate. And we're continuing to partner with Enrollment. We're thinking about the intake center. We have an ESOL toolkit on the City Schools website that answers a lot of the questions that people have. Feel free to look at it. I'm happy to share the link. But we can't do this without the partnerships from all over the city. So Central Seoul, Esperanza Center, I'm going to name them and I don't want to miss anybody. IRC, Casa de Maryland, TFA is working with us to get more teachers that might be ESOL, and we have a specialized program for them and we provide them instruction. Refugee Youth Project, Mayor's Office, Lutheran Immigration Service. So I hope I didn't miss anybody. Experience Corps and all the universities, they've just been amazing partners in supporting our students. So that's it.
Thank you. First, I want to acknowledge that one of our new board members joined us, and I want to make certain that everybody meets his Commissioner McFadden. So I'm going to let you go. If you have any questions, you can be the first to go. Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I have a question about the funding for pre-K EL instruction. How are we currently funding that program?
So it's tough because there's two funding sources that sort of support ESOL programming. We have our Title III dollars.
Mhm.
Our Title III dollars can only be supplementary, and they actually can fund pre-K sports. So because it's supplementary and pre-K is not part of the K-12 continuum, so we use that to fund an ed associate who works with our teachers who are funded through the locked dollars, which we do have flexibility on. So if we assign a teacher, we look at the pre-K enrollment as part of the consideration for the assignment. And then we have an ed associate funded out of Title III that supports that. But what would be great is if we were funded from the state for the ESOL pre-K students, which we are not, with the additional funding. So that's the challenge. I hope that answers that.
Sure. And also for the RELs, the reclassified students, they currently have a 94.5 attendance rate, and you said that we still monitor those students. How do we monitor those students?
It's a great question. So we look regularly at their performance. So you saw how we were looking at their performance. So the exited ELs are the RELs. So they're their same group. We look at their academic performance. They have limited accommodations in classes. So when we have our accommodations and we do our classroom integrated strategies, we ensure that our RELs and the teachers are aware who of their RELs are in providing that support. I don't know if that helps. And so as an ESOL teacher, you're well aware of the exited English learners, and they're part of the group that you're checking in with.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, I'll just make it quick. Two more things. What trends and data do we have for the iReady Window 1 areas for improvement?
Right, so let me go back to that slide. And in slides 41 through 46 of the appendix, it's detailed out. But here, what you'll see is the changes from BOY in third grade, so 2 years ago, to BOY fifth grade. These are the growth of the students. And within that, you'll see the changes, sort of their growth projection. So how much growth they made. And so for example, I'll do grades 3 through 5 math, 6.9% had no growth between that 2 year span, but 29.0% in proficiency levels on the iReady. And 29.0% made 3+ years growth. So that's the evaluation, and each of those charts is actually in the appendix 41 through 46.
I'm sure that there is a breakdown of, the improvement areas for this red area.
So iReady is really important for us to use as an indicator, but what we use even more than iReady is the Access 2.0, which is
Okay.
our state assessment, and then the formative assessments that link to that.
Mhm.
And so one of the things we're diving really deep in, so we're using iReady for the reading piece. And there is, you're absolutely right, really important indicators. It's sort of a double-edged sword, to be honest with you, with iReady. A level 1 student is really hard to assess in reading. So if they have very little academic English,
Sure.
they're reading, and if they're reading in their native language, we have to figure, there's components to that we have to figure. Math is a little easier, but even still, they have limited accommodations. However, we do use, so that's why I mentioned we're starting our WIDA formative assessments. So we use those formative assessments, we give them 3 times a year. They're part of Data Link, so schools can monitor the growth of their
Okay.
students in that area. And that aligns to the Access 2.0, which aligns to those components.
And I would just like to add, I totally agree with your response, but as schools are able to look at each and every student on the iReady and get their own profile and understand, for each of those students, to understand the areas of growth that they need,
Okay.
iReady is a little bit of a challenge to be able to roll that up and aggregate it across a larger group of students, though. But at an individual level, that information is there at the school level.
Thanks. And then finally, how often is the PD offered to school leaders for EL programs?
Oh, that's a great question. So it's differentiated, it depends. So we did have some summer offerings this year. We do targeted PD because we have staff who go to schools and work with the principals. But every month at the cycle of professional learning, we have a differentiated session for principals who want to focus on the cycle of professional learning with the component of EL built into it. So we build their knowledge around English learners while simultaneously doing the cycle. So those are the different offerings. And we're continuing to look at ideas around that because I think a lot of people are even more interested. And we're working on some PLC ideas and other things. So that's a great question.
Thank you.
I would also say this, I should have clarified this, and that your question sort of led me to think about it. The reason we focused in on the writing piece for the formative assessment was not just because iReady doesn't really break down writing the way we need it for the progression of English, but it was also because we've been looking at our data on the Access, and writing is the weakest area for our students. So we have been using that to sort of target that programming. I don't know if that, if you're asking about specific areas.
That's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, and great welcome to our new commissioner. Thank you all. Thank the staff and everyone who, this is a very challenging area, and as you're saying, as our population is growing, hopefully many more of our leaders, teachers, as well as administrators will take advantage of the professional development opportunities. But thank you again. This is a really full agenda, but we are going to get through. And the next one is, and I know I didn't ask my other two folks if they had questions. We had decided we want to move into the literacy update, and then if we have additional questions, we'll send them to you in writing. So we're now doing the literacy blueprint update. Welcome.
Good morning. How are you? Good to see you. Janice Lane, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning.
Laura Jones, Manager for Teaching and Learning.
So we are especially excited to present this information to you today, not only because the blueprint has been a central focus of our work, but it is becoming a reality today in professional development for our school leaders, and for our teachers this Friday. So really excited around the movement of the work. Just to reground and the starting of where we are, basically, as we've shared before, there was a two-pronged strategy for the blueprint. The discussion around really having opportunities for all schools to experience literacy work, student wholeness, and leadership, and then also the intensive learning site. So taking a few schools to go really deeply with around those 3 areas and thinking about the additional supports they could get within that practice. If you take a look here, this basically outlines the implementation timeline for us. So in the fall, we worked very closely with the cycles of professional learning that we've shared with you before in working towards the 3-year academic goal. That is work that has continued, that has been literacy focused across ongoing work in close reading, academic discourse, and writing. And now moving into, at that same point, we were accepting the intensive site applications for schools that were interested in going deeper into that work. You'll see, as I shared earlier for spring, where we are right now, that the traditional schools are continuing that professional development. School leaders are getting professional development, both and organized around the cycles of professional learning. And cohort 1, the intense learning sites are getting a deeper PD that we'll go into in a few slides. In fall of 2019, cohort 2 of the intensive learning sites will come in. Cohort 1 will continue as that group as well. And we will continue meeting with the all group in this citywide CLN structure where we have both the ILT members and the principals coming. And then rolling through for fall of 2020, you'll see that cohort 3 would then come in. So we're looking at increasing the expertise across schools as the timeline grows. Updates since the last time we talked with you. You will remember this because we brought the vendor profiles to you. But the vendor selection process was identified for both the professional development partners as well as the coaching partners to support the implementation and the expertise in this work in collaboration with the literacy team. The planning of the professional development has occurred, as well as the implementation starting today. The hiring process for the 20 coaches for those intensive sites has also started with the identification of those 20 sites. As you know, they were announced. We'll have those in a few slides to talk through in a minute, as well as the literacy curriculum audit and engagement process. Basically, what we did was we launched a PQS, being really identifying the opportunity for what we were looking for in the partners. What we wanted, most importantly, was partners that would partner with us, not come with a canned presentation or professional development sequence, but really matching the needs of city schools while at the same time providing the expertise that they both bring. So American Reading Company was chosen as the professional development partner to help us develop both the teacher professional development as well as the school professional development for all target grades, remembering grades 3 to 5, 6, and 9. The new teacher center was also identified as our partner to work with us around the coaching strategy so that they informed and helped us identify our strategy for interviews for the process. They also will be ongoing partners that will do training for the literacy coaches in those intensive sites, both onboarding as well as a weekly opportunity where they will be, if you remember, we talked about them being 4 days school-based and 1 day around professional development, so they'll work very closely with the literacy team in that work. And then finally, we did put an all-call out in the PQS as well for a online platform. That would be a place where we could track the work that the coaches were doing in those intensive sites to really be able to look at that progress across multiple schools. We have not launched that work yet because we don't have the coaches in all of the buildings yet. That will come a little later in our timeline. Oops, sorry. For the professional development, as I said, super exciting work that is currently happening is the work around based in our curriculum and aligned to the standards. This is really what we're focusing deeply with classroom teachers around. Also transfer and applicable skills and strategies for them to become more expert in their field so that they're using the curriculum as a source and really unpacking the standards, but also thinking about what can change tomorrow in instruction to improve student outcomes for students across the district. This partnership will also provide additional support to those 20 intensive sites. So some of those schools are serving as ongoing hosts for our professional development. So the American Reading coaches will be in those buildings doing partnership walks with leadership teams. Today, they're doing some fishbowl lessons with some of our students, so we'll be videotaping that, using that information for the teacher professional development so they'll get that additional support ongoing. As I said, there are 2 cadres of work that are happening in partnership with American Reading. The first is what we're calling the instructional leadership support for the literacy work, and invited to that are all principals, all of their lit reps, and the ILEDs are part of that work, as well as the ACLs. So coming together in that group, really to tightly look at what teachers are about to embark on in Friday's learning and how to best support that. So they're working with that team this morning, and then on Friday, they will be working directly with our classroom teachers on those targeted grade levels, really thinking about what's in the curriculum, what are they planning, how are they working together in cohorts, and really some exciting work for teachers. And then finally, there's also that alignment between the literacy coaching work. So in identifying both of our partners with American Reading and the New Teacher Center, they are collaborating together so that schools see this as a cohesive effort versus feeling like there are two separate entities pushing into the work around them. Current process that we're going through right now is the hiring process for our 20 literacy coaches. So there is a 3-round process, a pretty rigorous process for them to engage in. The first is that they do an independent performance task, which is their first level of screening. So if they pass that round, they are then granted the opportunity for a round 2 in-person interview. And then there is a round 3 performance task where they're actually asked to unpack some data from a real live classroom in city schools. They have a role play piece in that where they're coaching an actual teacher through that conversation around the data. And then they have a piece where they do an internal reflection around next steps and what would happen moving forward in that work. So we are currently, as I said, in that process. We've done round 1. We've just gotten a pool of identified candidates for the second round. And I'll let Laura jump in after we finish for a few questions, but I know that we're about to extend offers to 3 candidates out of our first initial pool. So we have an internal goal by February 15th that we reach to the point of getting 10 coaches in sites, and, are on our trajectory to get there. Also exciting work was the identification of the 20 intensified learning sites for literacy. Again, I think you remember through the process of what happened with this, that schools were open to apply for that process. And in that, they also had to get buy-in from their schools, so it wasn't just a principal decision, but the opportunity for 80% of their staff to really hear what this work encompasses and get an agreement from the staff. They also had to demonstrate readiness to do this work, so being able to share information like they have collaborative planning structures in place, but they're also flexible to create more extended learning opportunities for their teachers. And then finally, they did an in-person interview with members of their ILT team. So from that, there were 20 schools identified. Super important to the district were a variety of schools, so we wanted to make sure that we had some Title I schools, some not Title I schools, some newer leaders, some seasoned leaders, representation across CLN so that as schools are learning, they can serve as learning sites for other schools. So you can see the list there. Last night was our first launch to be able to bring the schools together and just really celebrate that they committed to this work, but also that they want to be leaders in the field for the rest of the district. So super exciting event last night. And as I said, today is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We have all of our school leaders participating in the first round of professional development. And then for our teachers, the first round coming on Friday. This also leads us to the connection around the literacy curriculum audit and engagement process. Part of the work that we've talked about previously was back when Dr. Santelises was here as the CAO, and actually when I was in the literacy seat in the district, was when Common Core was introduced, and we developed our own internal curriculum, very intentionally, because at that point there was not curriculum being released from vendors. So we developed our own curriculum as a bridge to get us to that next level of Common Core. That was 7 years ago, so it is time for us to revisit the curriculum to make sure that we have highly qualified materials, or high quality materials, in front of teachers that not only meet teacher needs, but really meet the continuum of learners for all of our students. So really thinking about the presentation earlier around our EL students, what are the supports internal to the curriculum, what are our supports for students with disabilities, et cetera. So we are launching this in-depth analysis in partnership with Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins has two partners within that work with them, TNTP and ANET, that are doing this analysis on a two-legged stool, I guess I would say, one around the analysis of the standards as a whole, and then one around the content knowledge that's evident in the curriculum across grade levels. So how does that content knowledge build and help develop the vocabulary, the comprehension, and the work around the research that we know is critical to our most needy students. They're also going to be looking at how the assessment platform aligns to that work. And something that's been really important to us throughout this process is making sure that we get teacher feedback and engagement throughout the process, so that we're not just asking teachers for a one-time feedback piece. There will be a survey that goes out to teachers to really talk about the curriculum, what they see sound in the curriculum, what did they see as areas of support that need to happen in the curriculum. You'll also see on the box to the right that we will be holding teacher focus groups, so that we're really trying to publicize this to get teachers in to share their expertise around what do they need in a curriculum and what do they see as the most prevalent concerns for their students. And so we're doing this in a very detailed process. So not only do we share the focus groups, but we'll also be inviting in a group of teachers that will be doing some training with that we're partnering with Ed Reports, so that the teachers really understand the process of reviewing deeply what the curriculum looks like. They will be part of our panel that will launch and review materials as we learn the findings from that project. So here you'll see the timeline that really outlines those next important steps of what we're doing. I think I've covered for January and February that our focus is launching that professional development, but not just the launch, the quality of the launch and getting feedback from our principal learning groups and our teachers, and then continuing through the literacy coach hiring process so that we have those qualified candidates ready to start with our schools as soon as possible in February. We'll also be capturing the beginning part of the feedback around the curriculum audit. What's been interesting around the curriculum audit is the team has been very willing to give us what they call red flag feedback. So we have weekly calls with the partners to really identify what they're learning in that process, so that in March, as we continue to do the professional development, that we'll also be looking for what are the findings that come from the audit that will actually launch us in an RFP process to review our materials completely and look for whether or not we need enhancements at grade levels, adoption of new curriculum, et cetera. And then finally in spring, that will take us through the work of continuing this ongoing learning, and then continuing the recommendations around what happens next for professional development. So I think it's really important to say that the work we're grounded in from now until we get the new updated work around the curriculum is highly transferable work. So for example, the work that teachers are engaging in coming up this week is sentence combining. So really in alignment to the work around what we've been doing in the cycles around writing, teachers are going to zero in on that skill and strategy, which is something that is transferable across whatever curriculum or whatever changes we may implement moving forward. So there's been a lot of work happening around the blueprint. I just want to say that super excited about it and really anxious to hear the feedback. And I want to give a shout out to the literacy folks who are not here today because they're out there in the field doing the work. But this work that we've moved tightly on a timeline is really amazing work, some of the best work I've been in since we've been here in city schools. And I want to give a shout out to Ashley Cook, who is our new Director of Literacy, Language, and Culture, and Kate Martin, who has been supporting the Blueprint rollout, as well as our full literacy team. So happy to take questions.
We're going to do questions, but I just want to be sure, I just want to mention that I'm taking a look at time. So I'm going to hopefully say that we're going to extend a little so that folks just know that, because we do want to take time for questions, and we do have a couple of procurement items. So.
Yeah. Absolutely, and in some ways mine's a statement that to kind of come back, maybe a quick response, but not a detailed one. So first of all, I've been on the Teaching and Learning Committee for 5 years now, and I agree, Janice, this is some of the most exciting work. Like, it's where we need to go. We're digging in deep. We're doing it with intensive sites. We're building capacity of our people. It's helping all, but then going deep in a few places. I loved being at the launch yesterday, and I talked to principals. One was Miss Miles, who is going to be a principal leader, and she's going to be leading a PLC, and she's going to be doing literacy. And she's like, you know what, she's not saying that she's the master, but she's going to be a lead learner, like we talked about, and she's going to spread the practice and do a great job. And I just think it's the right work. It's digging in deep. It's really hard work, but it's the right work. Because what we need to do is move the needle in academic outcomes for our kids. So I'm just like really happy, like all this talk, like we're like, and the fact that people aren't here because they're doing training with our people is really exciting. That is specific around our needs. My comment is, what's going to be different? Like, so I'm sitting here in the board, right? I've got to, what are the metrics for success? What are the, and we're not expecting the needle to be moved like dramatically in 1 year or even 2 years. This is really hard work that takes time. But what we need to know is, what are the metrics and indicators that we're on path for success? How are we tracking our intensive sites working? And then when can we expect, because we're going to do severe treatment on these intensive sites, when can we expect that you guys report out that our students are reading at a higher level, or whatever I don't want to link it to certain tests or scores. I want us to come back and say, we're doing better by our kids. That's what the board wants. And the thing that I just want you all to come, I'm saying the same thing to Dr. Santelises as well, and I'm looking to you, Mr. Conley, is like, what are the metrics? Year 1, year 2, year 3. So we can come back and say, yeah, we did the right work, and here's how we know it. And yes, there are some inputs. That's fine. Like there's great inputs. Like we're going to hire people. We're going to do a lot of training. And we're going to be doing we're putting a bet on coaching. Like we're putting a big bet on coaching. 20 literacy coaches. That's a big dollar amount. And how do we know if it's working for students? And so that's why I don't want a response, but that's what I'm going to be pushing on really hard, because I want to be able to hold us all accountable, that I know this is the right direction, but then I want to be able to justify it. And overall, I'm just really excited about the work.
Great, thank you. And we agree 100%.
I'm going to add to that. In the slide where you talked about the focus groups, and you mentioned in terms of the school leaders and teachers, the box also does include community. And living through last night, which I think was an excellent time for us, there is this sense from the community at large, for whatever reason, that sometimes we aren't as transparent. So to sort of align with what Peter has said, how are we going to be certain that process also includes parents, and that we're being very clear about getting their input and student voice in terms of what's happening with this work.
Thank you so much for flagging that. I talk really fast, so I should have highlighted that within the box, so I appreciate you calling attention to that. We are being deliberate around the opportunities for community to engage in this process as well. So as you know, in an RFP, we receive materials, and then that internal team will do the review first, which will include multiple stakeholders, so teachers, school leaders, executive directors, the ILED folks, some of our academic team, and the literacy team will look at those materials and make recommendations of the top, let's just say the top 3. And then we're looking at how can we take that to the community and get the community buy-in around that, as well as feedback. So we're looking at leveraging some of our community events that are linked in the literacy work to make sure that families, students, anyone who wants to look at the materials can come out and give feedback, as well as the needs around what needs to happen for that curriculum. So thank you for sharing that. And I'll make sure that we can share some of those details so that the dates and events are clearly articulated so that folks attend those, because we're looking for large feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioning last night reminded me. One of the comments that was made last night that resonated with me was a gentleman who talked about the fact that, did we know how many students actually do not know how to read at all, independent of age? And that is a concern and something that I hope we will continue, talk about. I don't have any magic answers, but just something we need to think about. Thank you.
Absolutely. Same notes that I took while I was listening, live streaming last night. So yes, thank you.
Hey, Janice.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. I have a question about the identification of the 20 intensified sites. So that was done solely by an application online? So
So
schools were able to apply?
that was the first level that they
Okay.
had to apply and show the interest, and then they had to go through those multiple steps.
Mm-hmm. So only if they chose to fill out the application, were they taken to the next step in this process?
That's correct. The ILEDs, the Instructional Leadership Executive Directors, worked with their principals around that work, and part of that was around what Commissioner Canham also framed, that they would become the lead learners in this process. Principals were also made aware of the fact that the first opportunity would not end, that if they weren't in that first cadre of the group, that there would be an opportunity for them to join a later cohort. And in this work, what you'll see from the next update when Whole Child comes, they also have 20 intensive sites for Whole Child, and then they have, or student wholeness, sorry, and then there will be 15 sites that are restorative practice. And part of the blueprint implementation team identified that they couldn't be multiple because of the focus work that they're doing. So when you look across the district, there are 55 total sites. Right, 20, 20, 40, and 15. 55, look at that coming from the literacy person with the quick math, right?
And last thing that probably could be answered later, but I'm curious, how are we monitoring the effectiveness of the systemic PD or the PD that is offered? Well, what is the plan for it since we're kind of rolling this out now? What will be the, I guess, tying into what Commissioner Canham was saying, how are we going to measure the effectiveness of the PD?
So one way that we do ongoing is survey information from teachers when they're finished the professional development. So online platform, paper format, same for the school leadership that's happening today. There are also TAG literacy folks that are attending the professional development. So as soon as I leave here, I have my assignment to hit for the afternoon. So we're spending time in those partnership meetings as well. And an additional piece we're doing is we are identifying a few principals, a few of the leadership folks, so the lit reps, as well as a few teachers that will be doing ongoing feedback sessions with them. So kind of I don't want to call it a focus group because I think we're using that term a lot, but it's like a little meet and greet where we're just going to have a chat and chew about what worked in the professional development, what were struggles, what do they see as next steps so that they can help inform that work that we do. So the literacy team has ongoing partnership meetings with both NTC and American Reading to really look at targeting specific what those needs are. So that's the way that we're trying to do that work. And then, of course, tying to metrics that we can discuss later through that.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you all. This is very exciting work, so we look forward to continuous updates,
Great.
and thank you all for today.
And this work will continue January, February, and March in that cohort. So if you'd like the dates, I can share them if you all want to pop by.
Yes, please. That would be great to be a part of one of those.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you.
We have a couple of procurement items. We can, actually, my understanding is one is being deferred. However, if there are some questions, we can ask them today if you'd like to. The first item, the special education related services one is being deferred. But does anyone have questions around that one that you'd like?
I didn't, I read it.
Okay. And the second item was Loyola University.
Correct. I do.
Go ahead.
So every time this procurement item comes up, I say the same thing. It's remarkable that we can't find, this is the one in Timonium, where people go, it's got a great space. I used to go to trainings there. It's a layout, it's got great parking, I understand it. The fact that we can't do our trainings and support Morgan State or Coppin State or city facilities, it's still kind of remarkable to me. And so can you just, I've asked this question, I would encourage us to support our local people. I know people are trying that, but has there been due diligence done in trying to locate space? Is this contract the same dollar amount that's done? Have we reduced that over time, or is it the same as years past? Anyway, those are my questions.
So the dollar amount's relatively the same. It's approximately $20,000 per year. It's a 3-year agreement. The rates that are being quoted by Loyola are the same as they have been in the past. They reflect a 50% discount given their current rates. We've also compared it to other places such as Coppin,
It's just cheaper.
and it's cheaper.
It's much cheaper.
And
Better parking.
when you take into consideration parking
And
and
breakout rooms. I know, I asked the same. Will someone build one of these in the city? I mean, my God. I'm just like, I don't know, it kills me. Anyway. Okay.
I mean, we have done other events in the city,
No, I know.
so I think
It's just the fact that our people go across the county line to actually get PD kills me. And I was part of that, so, I don't know. Just as long as we continue to think about that. But we gotta get the best deal. I understand.
Any other?
Yeah.
That's right.
Maybe you can get us some pull at Morgan.
That's what we're saying.
Yes,
Get us some pull. I think.
That's what we're saying.
No, those beautiful buildings I drive by, they're beautiful. I'm like, but it's the breakouts, that when you
Yeah.
really dig into how many breakouts we need. I've dug into this one. It's the breakout and it's
I
the
was-
parking.
And it's the part, and we've attempted to go and have in the past to Morgan and to Coppin and some of the other challenges there with things that happen during the school year.
Yes.
They have students there too. So then it's also that logistical challenge of, for those breakout sessions, we've then scattered all of our folks to the winds across the campus, which makes all of that really difficult to manage and ensure that, there's high quality implementation of those sessions across an entire college campus. But yeah, I mean, we've definitely done our due diligence and have formed some partnerships in the attempt to do so with like Hopkins and Morgan and Coppin and things like that as well.
Maybe we'll continue. I was shocked even with our graduation ceremonies at some of our local partners and what we were being charged. So I do understand what you're saying.
It's actually true.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
know.
And any other questions about about this procurement, or then I am going to take it that our committee is okay with moving this one forward? Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. And I just need to let everyone know, because we have ended this agenda, our next meeting, if I can find everything, is, give me your paper. Our next meeting is February the 27th, 9 o'clock. We'll be here. We will be looking at agenda items that include curriculum approval for math and fine arts. We're going to get an update on the pipeline for teacher and school leaders. We will take a look at the KRA 2017 results, and we'll have an update for special education. So another packed agenda. And again, we thank everyone who participated today in terms of giving us reports or listening and joining us. And this meeting is officially adjourned. I have no gavel, so I will. Thank you.
Thank you.